Samsung's Exynos chipsets have historically been less powerful than Qualcomm's Snapdragon chipsets. The latter has always dominated key aspects, including CPU, GPU, and connectivity. However, the newly released Exynos 2600 narrows the gap significantly. In fact, it outperforms the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 on several benchmarks. In this detailed comparison, we'll make sense of the benchmark scores and dive into the key differences to understand how the Exynos 2600 and Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 stack up against each other. On Geekbench, the Exynos 2600 posts lower scores than the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5. In the single-core test, the Snapdragon gets about 18% higher score, while the difference in multi-core scores is just 4%. The Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 shines on an 222, posting a total score close to 3.4 million versus 2.66 million on Exynos 2600. That 27% uplift in total score for the Snapdragon chip is also reflected in the CPU and GPU scores. The Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 also achieves a significantly higher score in the memory test, while the Exynos 2600 scores 3% higher in the user experience test. Benchmark results from the 3DMark Wildlife Extreme Stress Test show that the Dimensity 2600 performs on par with the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5. There isn't a big gap in stability either. The Exynos 2600 surprisingly outperforms the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 in the Solar Bay Extreme Stress Test, which means that the latest phones have excellent ray tracing performance. Now that we're aware of the benchmark data, let's dig further into the key differences to get a clearer picture. The Exynos 2600 was announced just 3 months after the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, as the world's first smartphone chipset to use a 2nm process.